You're listening to We Deepen Media.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm your host, Christina Weber, founder and CEO of We Deepen, Feminine Weapon, and also a certified professional coach and leader of the Love Club. If you haven't lately, go check out all the upcoming experiences at wedeepen.com. Click on that social calendar. At the time of this recording, we are in the process of reorganizing the calendar. You will see that there are multi-day events happening. You'll see a separate calendar for online experiences, and then one for Los Angeles, Miami, New York City, as well as Austin, Texas, which is where I'm based out of. So click on those cities and see what's popping there. No, we are going to be bringing you more events. So in the top right-hand corner, there's a button that says Join Space. Click that button and you will get updates as new experiences come and get added to those calendars. Now, when I say new experiences, what are those? I am curating the We Deepen Network, and our people are curating the best in class social and transformational experiences that are woven together to support you in having healthy, meaningful, loving relationships. Bonds build best over time. So it's great to have these communities and these spaces where you can get out and you can make connections, and you don't even have to be needy about them. And what do I mean when I say you don't have to be needy about them? It's that you go and you have interactions and you have beautiful interactions with people, and then you leave. And maybe you come back and you have more beautiful interactions with people, and then you leave. And then you go to the grocery store, and then you run into somebody that you met at that event, and then you have a nice interaction with somebody at the grocery store. And then you see them again on the street riding their bike. The best relationships are ones that start in friendship. And when there's an unknown, we don't know, like when you come together, you don't know what a relationship could come or flourish to be. We might have some ideas of who we're attracted to and feel the strings pulling at us and curiosity that's piqued. But the unfoldment of it, it's mysterious to me. I wish I knew. I wish I knew everything. You know, we have these desires to be in these sometimes long-term relationships and to grow old with somebody. But if this is your forever person, look back on your life when you're 80, 90, 100 years old, and then you can answer that question. So those are the experiences we're going to keep curating for you. Stuff by Kimmy Inch, who's a kink educator, pro dominatrix, who does something more experiences from the Love Club, as well as the biohacking conference is coming up at the end of May, beginning of June in Dallas, Texas. I'll be there. That's a multi-day event. Get on a plane, come join us. I'm excited for today's conversation. This is with Dolphin. Dolphin and I first connected through his concept, Relationflix. And Dolphin is someone to geek out about love and relationships. And that's what I love to talk about. If you ever meet me out in real life and you want to talk about love or relationships, I'm mainly the only thing that I'm interested in talking about. And he is similar in that way. So Dolphin, welcome to Deepen with Christina.
Thanks, Christina. Pleasure. I've enjoyed you from the beginning. And I think we are kind of kindred spirits in that way. Just maybe we all are. You know, we come into the world. Relationship is everything when we're very, very little. It needs to be that way. We're these mammals that aren't really self-sufficient until we're in our mid to late adolescence. And so relationships are at the heart of what makes us feel alive and makes us feel connected and makes us feel like life is meaningful. And some of us hold on to that inspired, curious relationship. And unfortunately, I think a lot of us put other things at the center of life and maybe to our detriment.
Maybe to our detriment. And then I see that a lot of people will circle back around to it later in life and be like, fuck, like I thought the wealth and the creating of the family and getting the white picket fence was going to fulfill me. And now I'm not feeling it. What what's happening. I could even, back in the day, Dr. Pat Allen, who wrote the book Getting to I Do, used to host a meetup the first Monday monthly in Culver City. And she would do a laser coaching. She'd invite, people would sign up. They go sit on her, stool right beside her, and she would laser coach them. Very similar. She had a very standard way of viewing love and relationships. And I look around that room, there'd be about 70 people in the room. Majority of the people were over 35.
Mm.
And I, at that point in my life, I just hit my 30s and was thinking, I thought this was going to be much easier. I thought that I would just find my person and we would be together and we live happily ever after. And there's much more to this. How did you get into this body of work? Because this is your life's work, is love and relationships.
Yeah. I would say I'm actually about human potential. Like at the heart of it, I actually coached professional sport for a number of years. I worked with at-risk kids and prison inmates, and relationships is, to me, it's like the highest expression of what we're able to create in life. All of that happens through relationship. And so, I think there's like the peak performance coaching, which I loved, and it's still a part of what I do because I learned so much there. But if we want to think about what we're able to do as human beings, we have to talk about relationships. It's like there's an African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so that's just true. And it is my life's work. And it's my life's work started before I was born. In a funny way, my mom grew up in a somewhat average, dysfunctional, middle-class Jewish family in Brooklyn, New York. And, it wasn't the worst, but she looked around at her family and was like, this is not how people are meant to be together. And so I think from a really young age, she knew that she wanted to break out of her kind of closed social and sort of, economic group and find out like what's out there and what's possible, because what I was born into, this is not it for me. And she did. She jumped on the back of the motorcycle of a draft dodger, and they drove across the country and ended up driving north across the border into Canada. And then somewhere along the way, she met a Gestalt therapist, and the Gestalt therapist that she started to work with regularly really kind of shattered her whole frame of like what was really going on. Why do we hurt so much? And why do we reach for those we love and not get our needs met? And why do we hurt each other when we're upset? And so that was her initial foray into deep personal work, was recognizing that even though there's these people out there that we love and hate and struggle with and celebrate with, inside we also have parts that we're not this singular identity, that we're actually made up of all of these identities with different ideas and different feelings and different values and different priorities. And the way in which these parts communicate dictates how our external relationships show up. And then she went on a long journey of about 15 years of just doing everything she could to learn about and understand relationships and communication. And this was the context I was born into. I was born into an environment where my mom was a coach and facilitator and educator around relationships and communication. And at a young age, obviously, as a child or a teenage boy, I was like, cool, Mom, like you guys go into that room and punch pillows and yell and cathart. I didn't want to participate. I wasn't ready. But because of how she raised me, which was a lot of acceptance, a lot of honoring and validating of me as a human being from the very beginning, I knew the work that she did and what she was really up to in life was of value and was meaningful. And my work it seems serendipitous. It seems sort of by chance. I don't really think that's true, but I was 20. I had been working some odd jobs, and I was born in Vancouver, BC, so west coast of Canada. And the provincial government there was hiring young people recently out of high school to travel around and do these kind of forum theater interactive workshops in schools. And so for 3 years, I traveled around BC. I did about 1,500 presentations or talks or workshops, presented to about 100,000 people. And we talked mostly about violence, racism, and sexual exploitation. And that was my initial movement into the world of facilitation, public speaking, coaching. And since then, I've worked with at-risk kids on the street. I've worked with prison inmates. I've worked with homeless people. I've worked with, leadership students in school. I've worked with high-performance athletes. I've worked with business owners. And woven all the way through was something about how do we become more present and come into a way of being more able to own our experience and more able to express our truth. And that if I was going to simplify it, that's what allows us to heal the past and really break through in the present and create the relationships we want. And now there's lots of complexity that we could get into, but at the heart of where I think we go wrong is where we abandon ourselves. We learn from other people and from experiences that, it's just too hard. It's too painful. And we disappear, we dissociate. And if we want meaningful connection and relationship, we have to reassociate. We have to show up again and stop abandoning ourselves. So that's my Cole's notes.
I'm curious about what you see, and specifically around the intersection of peak performance coaching and the types of people that would be receiving that coaching and their relational lives. Years ago, I read the book, The Big Leap. Gay Hendricks, Kay and Katie Hendricks have been relationship role models to me in my eyes. I love their coming together story. It's so powerful. But when I first learned of them, it was Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap, one of the greatest books. And I remember at the end of the book, around the last chapter, he mentions that, I don't know, some stat like 80% of successful people have awful relationships. And now I've been running the Love Club. I don't think I told you. I do know a little bit about the Love Club, but it's a 6-month intimacy accelerator for people who are currently single. It includes comprehensive relationship education, peer-to-peer matchmaking, and accountability to one's love goals. And the facilitators that I'm bringing to lead the group are fucking amazing at their crafts. Pro dominatrix, kink educator. They're at the top of their game and how they're teaching relationships. And I know some of them who are going home after we complete the call and are going to bed alone. It's an interesting space. And also too, I'll say that the people in my Love Club are also grateful and honored to be leading them. These people are like at the peak of their careers and, leading, at the forefront of, the consciousness movement. And so I'm like, how do we I'm really interested in creating couples, units that can send ripple effects out into the world. Like, how can we get more conscious beings together to couple up and to move through all the conditioning to actually, and also I'm seeing within there's a lot of things I think happening outside of the public's eye, where for the first time, you're able to see now the dominatrix are coming out of the closet. They're all writing their books. There's, talks about kink, but that's happening in our world. I don't think the general public is not, you're not turning on, Nightline News and they're speaking about, the kinks happening in the bedroom or the power dynamics. When you think of this, and I imagine too, you have friends who, you're hanging out with on the weekends that are fucking awesome, and they're currently single. It feels like we're in this predicament. What do you see it from your lens?
Yeah, so it's such a good question. There's so much to it. What's the first place I want to go? In the context of a survival environment, human beings throughout most of our evolutionary history, we survived. And the reason we survived is because we had each other. And so this is one of the things about mammals and humans in particular is We need each other in ways that most animals don't. And what that has in us is a developed, embedded, embodied sense of like a gravitational draw to be close, to be intimate, to co-create, to build together. It's woven into our evolutionary past, and it's still operating in us in the midst of a modern society where we don't need each other in the way that mostly we have throughout history. And in the West in particular, there's quite an individualistic kind of liberal milieu in the culture, right? So we're people who have been taught from the beginning, like, get out there, make something happen, be somebody, create something for yourself. And without making that wrong, that is a distinct departure from where we've come from for millennia. And that brings with it particular challenges. The other piece that I want to bring in, so I think there's an evolutionary context, a survival evolutionary context that's relevant to why we're struggling right now, and that we live in an environment where we can literally, pick up our phone and order anything we want. I don't need a relationship with the person I'm getting my food from. I don't need a relationship with the person that I'm getting my clothes from. I can just use money as the intermediary and get the things I need. And in that, all of the relationships that used to be fundamental to our day-to-day life aren't there. Now, some of us were born into family and community that's woven, whether it's religious or there's maybe culture, or those pieces help to bridge in a modern world, but it's still not the way it was. Do you know the Blue Zones series on Netflix?
I know of the Blue Zones.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a series on Netflix that basically studies 6 of these, or maybe 8 of these major blue zones around the world. And there's 4 primary categories that they're identifying are crucial to happiness and longevity. And one of them, not very surprising, is connection and relationship. And what all of these communities share is they have a shared reason for being, a kind of purpose for their life. And that relationships and that purpose are woven together. So what they get up for each morning and what they're about and what they want to do with their lives has a certain pre-existing alignment. And even though we might go to a conference or go to an event and everyone, is into spirituality, or they're into biohacking, or they're into something, that in a way is a very thin and narrow sort of proxy for deeper culture. Like, oh, we actually come from the same place. Our families are interconnected. My grandmother knows your grandfather from when they were 2 years old. Like, that kind of culture can't be easily replaced by some shared interests.
Mm.
And so then what happens is people are coming together in relationship with different cultural histories, which means the implicit lens they look through to make sense of what matters is different. And if you want to look at what causes the major rifts and conflicts and challenges in our relationships, it's when something's going on, there's an underlying reality to what's going on, and we don't see it or feel it the same. The things that are important to you are not equally important to me. And then what happens in the human system is we get a sense of, oh, wait, we're not really on the same team here. And that's extremely challenging to navigate, especially if we grew up in a culture and in an education system that didn't really educate us around communication and relationship. So we have these varying differences in a cultural history, in a way in which we make sense of meaning and value. And then we don't have skills and references that we can use to properly navigate those things. So I would say that's at the heart of it. And then there's, a million other things that are at play as well.
How do we resolve this? And so in the Love Club, there's a group that they're ranging in age from 30 to 87. And the younger people within the group are designed to create family, most of them. But also seeing in that demographic, there's also a moving away. I've never, being a child, I just felt like eventually one day, of course, I'll be a mother. Now I think this is the first generation, granted, who am I to know what's real or not real? There, people could be like, every other generation has had many people who didn't want to have children. But there's a lot of people who don't. So to create those bonds, the connection that is more meaningful than, say, shared interest. Why are people coming together? So there's the group, the family, the younger generation, say the 30s, 30s to early 40s. Also, I see a lot of women and men. A lot of women will, especially if they are in their late 30s, early 40s, they still feel this like they will have this biological desire to procreate, and they feel there's no men out there, they're too old, they can't see the guys. But I actually have seen plenty of men in their 40s and 50s who haven't had a family yet, who are craving to have the family too. That creates a deeper bond. Granted, there's many single parents running around out there that thought that was going to be something to pull the connection, closer to one another and deepen the bond. And then you have the older demographic who's not desiring to procreate. They're actually seeking partners who have adult children or no children at all. But they really, they have this longing to be in connection. And so if shared interest isn't enough, I have my own theories, but what keeps people together? Why should they come together and be together in, the 21st century?
Well, so there's a couple of questions in there, like what keeps someone together, and to be just completely oversimplistic is just to choose to be together. Like ultimately, that's what allows someone to be together, is to choose to be together. But how do you go about doing that in a way that really works? I think there's a lot to that question. I mean, you think about if someone wanted a family, of course, they could just go to some sperm bank, like if a woman, she's functioning reproductive organs, she could just have a child. It's on the table. She could move to a community that practices enforced monogamy, where basically part of the culture in the community is to partner up and have a family. I think one of the big challenges we face is that we want a whole bunch of things. And what we struggle with is to identify in an authentic way, in a way that we're willing to actually step into and own in our way of living, is that there's a hierarchy of values in the things that we choose. And the moment we get clear that the family is actually at the top of that hierarchy, then our life begins to change. And where I think a lot of people struggle is that they haven't gotten clear about what belongs where on that hierarchy. And so they're holding things. Maybe they have a lifestyle they really love. Maybe they love being close to the ocean. Maybe they, are making lots of money. Maybe they love sleeping with different people, like whatever it is. None of it's wrong. But certain things are going to lead you in the direction of safe, stable, secure family, and other things are not. And people struggle with coming to terms with the reality of that, and not to their fault. Like, what examples have we had? For most people that are middle-aged or older and are struggling to find partnership, not exclusively, but often we'll look back and we'll see, a cultural and familial history of unhealthy, unsafe relationships. And then now they're older and they're recognizing that the choices they've made and the pieces that they were given when they came into this world didn't easily suit healthy, solid, stable, long-term relationship. The fortunate thing is that everything indicates that we can heal and learn and grow. But it doesn't come free. It's not cheap to heal attachment wounds and relational patterns. It's the deepest, hardest, most uncomfortable work that we can do.
You're in a relationship now. Are you married?
We're not married, but partnered. Yeah, we have a son.
Do you desire marriage?
That's a really good question. Um, I have a mixed relationship with institutionalized kind of authority and this kind of top-down approach to kind of condoning or validating what is just natural in life. So I think I come from an environment that was very kind of anti-establishment, non-institutional. So I don't have a strong draw, but what I definitely feel is the desire to have my home base, which includes my partner relationship and my family, be rock solid. I think the idea that we should be able to just do whatever we like whenever we like and kind of just feel fancy free all of the time is divorced from what solid long-term sustainable relationship also includes. And that isn't to divorce ourselves from, flight of fancy or, synchronicities or, a desire to just be spontaneous. But again, I think people in modern Western culture, we know more on the level of information than any other group of in human history. And in some ways, in I think more kind of emotional and embodied ways, many of us are still children. Like we just didn't learn to grow up. So it's sort of like Peter Pan syndrome, like Pleasure Island. We live in a world that is catered to our immediate gratification, and that stunts us in some significant ways, especially when it comes to relationship.
I agree with the marriage of the, it's a governmental validation, like it's a certification from the government that you are now a legal entity. And however, marriage though does help to set a container. It should be viewed as, can be viewed as an achievement,
Mm-hmm.
And it spaces out. There's the dating process. And then there's the engagement process. And then there's the, let's take this next step. Now, on another perspective is that people be like, well, do you really want an elevator relationship? That's an elevator relationship. Like we've got to get somewhere and then get somewhere and then get somewhere. I do, though, believe love is earned. It's an earned experience. And you do that. That's when you add discipline into the process and when you keep showing up for each other again and again and again. And it does take the continued effort to move through the layers of the ego, of your fears, of your judgment, of the suppressing or hoarding pieces of information, to continue to be a more authentic expression of yourself while you're in the presence of another human being, coupled with ever increasing acts of sharing. Mm-hmm. And that process, like you don't meet somebody and you're like, do you want the login to my bank account? Like to get to a space that you can really share with another person, the shirt off your back, like eat the food. I'm making food. Like I'm going to give and put you. I do. Maybe I live in this like fairy tale reality that you will put somebody else before your own needs and they'll put you before their own needs. And then it's not to say that I'm not going to go to my yoga class. It's I'm going to take care of myself so I can take care of you. And I can put you first and you're going to put me first. And then we're taken care of completely. And maybe it's this, I don't even want to say Disney has given it to me because I don't think Disney has given this, but this like spiritual realm, if we all put each other first, then I never have to worry about my own individual needs. Mm-hmm. I just have to show up to take care of myself so I can be the best for you. And that is an earned experience to continue to show up in that way over and over and over. And through that, we deepen and deepen and deepen. and the relationship becomes more enriched and more fulfilling. And we can soar more greatly to, peak performance through that experience. So marriage, back to where I was going with that, marriage is kind of this, it's this process that's least in the mark. Now I can say you can rip out of the government aspect to it and create a union with you and another human being and a celebration. I love the celebrational aspect to it. Inside of your relationship, how do you create safety and know, without the marriage, to know that both of you are in it and to show the world that you're in it? Because there's another thing that marriage actually does. It like tells everybody else around. If you're just the girlfriend, the wife or the husband has more validity than, and also too, as I will say, it's, as we're working this out together, I find it, funny sometimes where I've been with my significant other I love the term significant other. I've been, we dated for some time, non-exclusively. We've now been in more of an exclusive container for the past 4 or 5 months, but I would not call him my life partner. Like we're exploring, we're testing it out. We're playing with that. We're practicing. But he's not that in this moment in time. So when do you even, marriage kind of gives that way to acknowledge, like, actually, we're now let's do life together. We've been through these hard challenges. Dating should actually be the where all the fuckery happens and where all the tension points and where it gets really, really messy. And so that's all worked out by the time you get to a container like marriage.
I mean, I think that's funny to think that it'll all be worked out when you get to marriage.
Totally, for real.
I don't think that's so. I don't think it's a helpful idea. I know what you're saying. I think the better job we do at really living out the proper stages of development through childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood sets us up to have perspective when we enter into a partnership like marriage. And I don't inherently have an issue with marriage. I just know it's not the thing. Like marriage instituted by the church and by the government is not the thing. It represents a thing. And I think, what we want is for the big decisions and commitments of our lives to emerge out of authenticity. And if we're a part of a culture that we are embedded in, like I like this idea of what we belong to informs what's right for us. And what I mean is like what we're in service to in life informs what's the right thing for us, what's the right thing for us to be, to do, to commit to. And in a really kind of in a community that has cultural continuity, if marriage is a part of that community, then that is just naturally what the kids and adolescents and young adults are thinking about, orienting to, moving in the direction of, and ready for when the time is right. But again, we live in a very disjointed, disconnected, non-continuous modern culture that leaves us having to use things other than just our authentic, deep sense of what's right for us to make decisions around, is this the right relationship? And should we be open? Or, we've been together for a year. Where's my ring? Like all of these funny things that we do. And we look at the infidelity within marriage and the divorce rates. Marriage is not the answer. But if we want to look at what allows relationship and broader society to work, family is at the heart of that. And I think there is a kind of conservative value that's under fire more than ever before that says that we don't need this institution anymore. Let's just do it the way we like. And I think that's a very juvenile, immature, ungrounded, unexplored way to look at what allows society to function and thrive. And I'm not a Puritan, and I'm not like when we think about conservatism and liberalism from sort of an American perspective or American lens, this is not a right and wrong. And I think this is so often what happens. Like we get into this idea that oh, these conservative values feel like an affront to me. They're wrong and bad. Or these liberal values are so immature and irresponsible and they're wrong and bad. They're just bringing relevant pieces to the table that are of value, and that it's our job to find where does that rightfully land? Like, how do I honor the value of conservatism and maintaining something that has worked for decades or hundreds or thousands of years without being rigid or closed off to the rightful evolution and change of humanity and society and relationship. And so, I think it's a both and, when it comes to partnership, I don't think you can have healthy, thriving family and healthy, thriving society without long-term committed partnership. And of course, that isn't to say that any individual relationship needs to do that. It needs to be culturally normative for us to value that and to honor that. And I think there's lots of downstream impacts of the more kind of progressive liberal approach to relationship that we haven't seen yet, like negative consequences of just opening it up and having it be more of a free for all. So, I think it's a both and. We need to start to pull the real gold out of these different lenses and perspectives. And of course, each person has to choose for themselves. But if we choose in a way that's disconnected from the whole, I think we're lost. And I think it's really in retrospect that we realize we've made big mistakes in that way.
How would you, if there is a couple who had, say 9 months, they've been in a relationship and they're wondering, is this the right one? Should I commit or should I leave? And they don't know which one is the best direction, but they've got to choose one. Am I going all in, or should I go out there and look for something else that may be a better match for me? What would you tell somebody who's listening? Hey, I'm in that boat. Like, I don't know if this is the right one. What should they do to figure that out?
Yeah. I'll give an unsatisfying answer to start, and then I'll get a little more nuanced. A lot of the time, most of the time, if you're wondering if it's the right relationship, it's not. And then where to go from there? Well, here's the thing. The idea that you're going to find the one and it's all going to be just rainbows and lollipops, forget about that. Just completely forget about the idea that it's all easy street once you find them. We all bring in our own package. We all bring in our own incomplete, unresolved things. And it is within relationship that we're meant to sort all of that out. Yes, we can do our own work, and it's vital that we do. And yes, we can heal and grow in ways that are outside of, partnership. But the deepest, darkest, most challenging aspects of our relational world are meant to be addressed and integrated and healed within partnership. So, okay, let's get that out of the way. The piece that I think is the most important, and this is the one that I think we get the least support with growing up to really learn it, is, are we coming from the same place and are we genuinely moving in the same direction in life? And this brings it back to the cultural piece. If I grew up with you, if we grew up in the same village and our families have known each other and I've watched you grow up from diapers, I've seen you when someone takes your toy, and I've seen you when it's your birthday, and I've seen you when someone you love passes away, and I've seen you in all of these aspects of life. I know you. I know you in a way that we couldn't possibly know each other by meeting on an app or at some event somewhere. And I think we want to know each other in that way before we can really, in a meaningful way, get clear, like, oh, I want to spend the rest of my life with this person. And that's why a cultural backdrop or some kind of cultural framework that you're both deeply embedded in and committed to can be so helpful, because it bridges much of that getting to know each other piece in a way that's better than just social interaction. I get what you're about because of the community you've committed to, the culture that you're really committed to. It's why people that share a religion tend to have better long-term relationship outcomes in terms of divorce. I don't think, Islam or Christianity have the answer, but I do know that those numbers represent something. They represent something that is like a glue for relationship. The other thing that I think is good, so we can get into like, what does it mean for us to come from the same place and be kind of facing the same direction in life? The other one is, I love the word sincerity. To me, you want to be with someone that in your bones is sincere about showing up in a way that honors them and honors you, and is sincere about taking full advantage of this gift of life. In other words, they want to show up for the hard stuff. They want to be as responsible as they're able to be over time. They want to be honoring of love and connection and intimacy and closeness, and that they're willing to pay the price of that sincerity. If you had very little else, but you had sincerity, I think you can build a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
If you have everything lined up and there isn't sincerity, you actually don't have a relationship.
What are some things that you would suggest for people to do together during the dating process?
Okay, I have a couple answers. The quick answer is, I was watching this behavioral economist talk about dating and dating apps, and most dates don't do a good job to get us off to a healthy start with a relationship. He said, play a game, and play a game that's challenging. Play a game where you need to collaborate to succeed. Play a game where the result is not guaranteed. So one of the simplest ways we can get to know someone is to watch them when they get into difficulty, where they need to collaborate, where there's going to be friction and disagreement and conflict, and you get to see and feel how they show up for that. Now, that doesn't mean that someone might not still be on their best behavior and is hiding their, their deep, dark secrets of anger management or whatever it is. But I think getting in the habit of that as a, we're not getting together just to hang out. We're not getting together just to have a nice time. We're getting together to get to know each other. And so the more you can have your dates and your interactions be places where you both enjoy yourself, but also get outside of your comfort zone, I think that's extremely helpful to the getting to know each other process.
So if we were to brainstorm some of the things that they could do together that would create that experience of playing a game, that could be going to an escape room.
Sure.
It could be climbing a mountain or going camping.
Yeah. Totally.
A festival.
Yeah. Volunteer together. Right? Do something where you're giving back, and where there's lots of moving parts and there's a commitment and an investment, and again, not uncertain outcomes. You get to see them interact with all sorts of different people. I think these are really good ways to get a feel for someone that isn't just like, it's just so I call it first date syndrome, right? We just put on the very best of ourselves, got our hair looking just right. We didn't eat a bunch of food last night, so we feel a little bit thinner, and like we're standing up straighter than usual, and we're not ourselves with each other. And I understand it. It's just not that helpful if you really want a relationship.
And I would say, that the volunteering, I know some people would be like, oh, let's go to Google and Google ways that we could volunteer. It's something so simple. Could be host a gathering together at your place and do that as a volunteer. Don't sell tickets to your gathering for your friends to come, but get together, organize the food, invite some friends over, create the structure of the experience that you're going to have. It could even be a game night that you're organizing amongst friends. It could be a salon, where you are going to unpack a specific topic that's of interest to the two of you. It could be inviting a group of friends over and actually coordinating a cooking class for all of you to do together. Maybe it's some skill that you have and that they have that you're each going to teach your skill to the group of people. But that's also helps to create a community. So now you've enrolled people into your connection to be supportive, because our relationships do need to live inside of a community. We do need villages around us too. That's one of the reasons I do love marriage unionized or governmental. It doesn't need to be through, the traditional way, is that you're actually standing in front of your friends and family and you're saying, this is really important to me. Will you help me? And in the dating process, you can do that with your friends too, of like enroll them to enliven your intimacy journey, and they can be there to support you through it. It's never useful when we just have friends there's like, oh, fuck that. I can't believe he doesn't open the door for you, or he didn't call you back, or what does that text mean? Oh, I don't like how he says that. That's not helpful. What is helpful is doing it together and injecting more joy into the process by sharing the experience with loved ones around and helping you discern what is the best connection for you. You mentioned incels when we were setting up this conversation. I've looked at, the concept of MGTOW. MGTOW is men go their own way. I think incels is similar to MGTOW. And then another concept that's, I think, wrapped up in that one, but also a little bit separate is this, passport bros. I'm curious because you brought up the topic incels as a potential discussion point for today. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. I remember hearing a conversation Jordan Peterson was having a while back, and he talked about this kind of like enforced monogamy, like forcing people to come together. Now, that's a misinterpretation of the meaning of what he was saying, although I think he often is misunderstood, partly his own doing. But when we have culture and there isn't a cultural pressure for people to partner and to commit to that partnership, especially as industrialization and the concentration of populations in urban areas has happened, and now with the internet, what ends up happening is this very small percentage of men who are these, quote unquote, high value men get an incredibly disproportionate amount of attention and interest from the broader cross section of women in that culture. We're talking about kind of a heteronormative lens right now. And that it's understandable, right? Women, their job is to try to find, like, just from a kind of biological imperative, their job is to find the best mate possible to procreate. And so they want these, motivated, driven, successful, attractive men to be their person. Now, in a world where you can swipe, I don't even know what swipe left, swipe right. What do you do when you're skipping someone? Anyway, where that's happening, and there's pornography and there's social media, and then there's not this sense of, oh, I need to choose someone and really invest and build something with them, then a massive amount of the attention and the choice from women goes towards a very small percentage of the men. And I think ultimately it's a disservice to everyone. But initially, the downstream of that is that more men than ever before don't feel included in the whole world of intimacy and relationship. And there isn't a clear way forward for them. And so now we have young men who have never or have had almost no interaction and positive reinforcement from intimacy with women. I had some of that growing up, but nothing like I think it exists today. And just to pull back the curtain on that, like, it is excruciating. It is excruciating to grow up in a world where you don't feel seen, where you don't feel valued, where you don't feel like you're attractive to the people that you're attracted to, and partner that with a lack of emotional intelligence and awareness and connection to meaning that would have me want to hold my frustration and sadness and anger in a responsible way. And you have a kind of powder keg. You have all of these hurting, confused, frustrated, angry young men. And I'm not, that doesn't mean it's the woman's job to kind of address that anger or that frustration or that lack of feeling accepted. It's just true that we live in a culture where there is a lot of those men. And those are the most dangerous human beings that there are. Hurting, angry, confused young men. It's not good to have a society full of men like that. And so I think if we care about ourselves, if we care about each other, if we care about our children, this is a question that we actually need to start to engage in more openly and more kind of distinctly. And what does it look like? What does it look like to start to heal the wounds? And I know there's wounds on all sides of this equation, but I think a return to more conservative values. It's so funny to hear myself say this. I grew up for sure as a kind of liberal, progressive, left-leaning person, but more and more I find myself, and I think we naturally do this over time. We become more conservative as we get older, but I find myself identifying with more conservative values, knowing that for me in the background, it's just part of an A-frame. Progressive and conservative, or liberal and conservative, are two parts of something that holds society together, and we need to learn how to include them, in a balanced way properly. But just in terms of the incel question, it's like, I think we need to invite more dialogue. I think we need to learn how to see and feel each other more fully and more deeply. And I think we need to look in the mirror and see the ways in which we've made our lives about ourselves. And I think that at its core is where the disconnection and discord begins. It's like when I am for me and me alone, I now contribute to a society and a culture that isn't inclusive and doesn't know how to manage the competing desires and needs that are at play in human relationships.
I think it's important that we're having conversations about the topic. And, here we are intellectualizing it all. I'm curious around what is like the somatic experiences where people can go to and they can actually feel a sense of belonging. They can feel the sense of community. They can feel seen and heard and present with other beings, as opposed to, a bunch of, talking heads. What are some experiences that you've had that helped you feel love, beyond the relational love? We could say, yes, when I'm in bed with my significant other, being fucked open to God. But how about the actual community experiences? Church, I believe, does that for some people. However, the church experience can be very intellectualized as well. It's a lot of talking that's happening. You're sitting in the pews and you're witnessing a preacher, give you information. I do know there's Tantra experiences. There's a lot of stuff that we've worked through, are shared through the We Deepen network. But for you personally, what are some of these events or experiences that have helped you feel in your body connection?
I would say the simplest, most accessible one for most people is to just be in nature. I think nature is naturally what it is. You know, a tree is never trying to be something other than a tree. And there's something nourishing to us about being in the presence of nature that's just simply being and doing what it does. Um, and there's lots of evidence and research that says, you know, people who spend more time in nature tend to be more grounded, less stress, healthier. Now, I think that piece is missing the human component, which is really crucial for us. So I think what someone can do on a really practical level is do a kind of activity inventory. Think about a week of your life and what do you spend your time doing? How much time do you spend by yourself? How much do you spend with others? What are you doing when you're spending time with others? And see if there are places, people, activities where you feel more safe, more grounded, more connected, or less. And so the simplest thing that I could invite someone to do where you're not having to step way outside of your comfort zone is to do this inventory and then just turn the volume up on any of the activities that have you feel safer, more connected, more present. And when I say turn the volume up, I mean do them a little bit more. And do the other ones that make you feel less safe, less connected, less grounded, less present, a little bit less.
Hmm.
I think that's just low hanging fruit. Anyone can do that, and without too much trouble, do the things that make them feel more connected and grounded more, and the things that make them feel less connected and grounded less. To get more specific, you know, there are therapists and there are coaches and there are workshops and there are activities that are specifically designed to have you be in your body. I would say yoga is probably the easiest, most accessible one. So for anyone that has struggled with yoga or says, you know, it's not my thing or I'm not flexible enough, I love the quote. It's like saying you're too inflexible for yoga is like saying you're too dirty for a bath. It's like, just get there. Get there, and not all yoga classes and not all yoga teachers are created equal. So try a few. See if you can find someone online. You can find, you know, people teaching online, although I think in person is way better. And then I think, you know, the workshops and the yoga classes points to something that I think is embedded in ancient human culture, which is circle, like the coming together of community, where there's an elder or there's a space holder or there's a guru, whatever you call it. There's someone who is more embodied and has more wisdom than you do, and they're holding the space for you. And I think there is something inherently good and right about that. Now, we could talk about, you know, cults and how and where those things go sideways, but ultimately, I think the more time we can spend in spaces that are held and guided by people that are further along the path than us, that can invite us into, in a safe and relevant way, invite us into more openness to ourselves, more relationship with our somatic body, with our emotional body, more of a letting go of needing to know or figuring things out or being more kind of what they call left-brained. Each time you invest in that, it changes you a little bit. I think, you know, it's not helpful to think you're going to go to a weekend retreat and then all of your issues are going to go away. But it is true that if you tend to go on, you know, 24-hour benders on the weekend and it takes you a day or two or four to recover, and this weekend you're going to go to a 2-day meditation retreat, like, wow, that's going to be uncomfortable for you. That's going to be way outside of your comfort zone. And if you do it and you show up earnestly, it has the power to change the trajectory of your life.
Mm.
So I think getting people clear about what's at stake, it's like it really does matter that you make choices that are in your interest and that connect you to a more grounded, more open way of being in life. And it can be as simple as doing one thing a little bit less this week and one thing a little bit more. And it can be as invested as traveling to the other side of the world for a week to be in a space with someone that just deeply resonates with you and that you just know you're going to learn from. And I think it all helps. And as we go, we learn more about what's right for us and what's good for us.
That's the journey. So I know we have just a few more minutes, and this question or what I'm seeking now could have been something that was discussed in the first, because having people talk abstractly about relationships, but like getting into it, give us some about your relationship history. You know, we heard of how you got into this work, but you personally, your love life, how's the journey been for you?
Challenging. Yeah, I mean, a little bit of the backdrop is that my mom and dad had a 2 or 3 month love affair and then split up before I was born. So I never had a model for a healthy relationship. My mom had partners throughout life, but I never really had a father figure through those relationships that she had. And my dad reached out after I think I was about a year and a half, and he got back in touch with my mom. He wasn't in the picture at that point. He said he wanted to be a part of my life, and he lived 5 hours away from where we lived, and mainly I would see him once or twice a year. So for me, the challenge was to have a really amazing, close, loving relationship with my mom, but that was a relationship that didn't include a father figure, and so my deeper blueprint is that wasn't there. It was like just a gap in me, and that's been a lot. It continues to be, but that's been a lot of challenge for me and a lot of work for me of discovering on my own without an underlying blueprint, like what is it to for man and woman to be together? What is it for partnership to be the kind of vehicle that you're moving in life with? And I think my solution, my relational solution, was what is often referred to as avoidant attachment. It's like I just become self-sufficient. I was okay on my own. I didn't need anybody, and I didn't open up in ways that are needed for a relationship. And it was interesting. I think in my mid-20s, I realized this, and the way it came through in words was like I had lost my innocence. I realized I had sort of covered up and lost touch with my own vulnerability and innocence as a way to cope with the insecurity and fear and pain of not being connected in that way. And my relational journey is really just the uncovering and rediscovery of innocence and vulnerability, and learning how. And I think this will resonate with anyone, because I think it's really what we're all grappling with is, how do I learn to not abandon myself in the ways that I learned to when I was younger, when things got hard? I think that's the core wound, is the abandonment. Yes, the other abandoned us, but the problem was not really that. The problem was that we adopted that strategy of abandonment, where we don't stay present to, and we don't honor what's real and true for us. And if I was going to say that there was one thing at the heart of our healing of relational wounds and our capacity to grow healthy relationship, it is in learning how to not abandon where we have, and to learn what it is to show up in a connected, open-hearted, associative way, and to face and feel all the consequences of that.
Can you give me an example of how you have been vulnerable in your current relationship?
Yeah. To me, the easiest and most accessible way, and the way that I feel best about, because usually when it matters to be vulnerable is when you could choose to not be, and it would be hard and not great for the other. And that is to share what's going on for me in a transparent way without an agenda. In other words, I'm not sharing what's going on with me so that they change. I'm not sharing what's going on with me so that they can see that they're wrong, which is sometimes how we do transparency. It just doesn't work. But to genuinely say, like, hey, human over there, this is how it is for this human over here. I want you to know me. I want you to feel in some way what I'm in right now and what I'm struggling with. And I want us to find our way back to a place where we're holding each other. And the more I do that, the more I show up for myself in that way. Like, oh, I'm not going away. I'm not hiding. I'm not trying to make this feeling go away. This is how it is for me right now. And then what naturally follows, which is really powerful, is to also share what we want, to make requests and to share what we want with the other when we're hurting, when they're hurting, and as much as we can to make room for them to say yes or no to that request.
So I guess
my work. Yeah.
What I'm asking for, though, is and maybe it could be too much for this podcast recording, but more of a real life example of vulnerability from the man's, from the male side in a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. The piece that's been up as a pattern with me and my partner is I often feel like I'm sacrificing the things that I want and that feel good to me in the interest of meeting her needs and meeting the needs of the relationship and of our family. And I often don't feel seen in that, or there's times when I don't feel seen in that. And there's times when I don't feel that there's a kind of surrendered reciprocation of that. And so that's been a big part of my sharing and learning how to say that as that is for me.
So the sacrifices that you're making to stay in connection can feel vulnerable because it can be, feels like, am I missing out? Am I making the right decision? I know I'm making this decision. I'm going to be here. I'm not going to leave here. And I'm choosing to be here, but I'm also not doing X, Y, and Z, which in my mind sounds fun and maybe enthralling to participate in. And maybe I would grow too if I did that as well, but I'm not. And I'm going to be here with you, and then not being seen or honored for choosing to be here right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit different than that. It's not like activities that I would like to do, although maybe that sometimes. It's more like I feel like I'm sacrificing what my real purpose is in the interest of meeting the needs of my partner or taking care of the relationship. So if I were to honor what feels like my real purpose, there would be friction and conflict. And so and being in relationship, my desire is for my partner to love me being aligned with my purpose so much that she will come along with me, even when that's hard for her. And then that's the kind of push and pull and give and take that we've been navigating.
Thank you for sharing that. I imagine there's a lot. It goes a lot deeper, and you're in the experience of that, and it's unfolding. What is your purpose?
Oh, the little questions. I would word it a bit differently, but I'll start with this. And there's this quote from Eckhart Tolle that I really love. And it's something like, you are here to participate in the divine unfolding of the universe. And so for me, my deepest purpose is life is up to something. Life on earth is up to something. We're some kind of leading edge of that life. And I am a piece in that. I'm a drop in that wave. And how I show up, I can choose to be in full sort of surrender and givenness to the wave, or I can do something that's about me and what I want. And to me, my purpose is to align with what life is up to, and to be given to that. And through that, obviously, there's evolution and growth for me, but that's all in service to something more than myself. So that's it. And then I believe that the specific thing we do is much more a kind of dharmic piece. It's like I was born into a certain life with a certain body and a certain family. And that means that my way to participate on the leading edge of that wave is specific to that. But the ultimate contribution isn't about me and my life. That's just the vehicle I have. If that makes sense.
That makes sense. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the world. It's I view people like you as colleagues, and I think that we're living in a time like never before, where the information is available to us to support us in having healthy, epic love lives, and of coming together, creating families, and transmuting a lot of the chaotic energy that disconnects us from one another. I have, in my family, there's some estrangement. And I would love to see that be eliminated, and that people can be who they are and love for who they are and understood. And we can use all of the types of typologies that are now available to us, from human design to gene keys, genetic energetics to aboutly and neural brain training. So a lot of this is becoming available to us, and people are accessing the information. And I know, similar to you, my aim is to shine light on the relationship industry. I know if you can't see me, but I'm making the word industry in quotes, whether it's a field of human connection, whatever we want to pull people into. But there is a lot of teachers, concepts, experiences, and wisdom available now to help us have more meaningful, healthy relationships. Dolphin, what would you like people to know about you and your work? I know you have a podcast. You do one-on-one coaching as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on before we close out?
Yeah. So the podcast is within the Relationflix education platform. It's called the Best Relationship Podcast. So check us out. All major carriers have us. And the podcast is really about getting into the practical, the spiritual, the very nuances and complexities of how and why relationships work, and when they go wrong, and what the most effective tools are. So that's, I think, a really cool offering for people to check out. For me, my work, in a way, I don't take the line that there is some exotic answer out there that's going to do it for you. I don't like new techniques and new strategies, and sure, fine. But actually anything that quote unquote works, I'll use the air quotes now, anything that quote unquote works is tapping into something that inherently exists in you and that inherently is you. So my work is really about bringing people into a space where they can stop chasing, stop fighting, stop trying to figure it out and find it, and to start listening. I use something called transformative communication, and it's a particular approach and model that, again, the way I designed it, I wanted to look with real discernment and clarity and nuance on what occurs when someone who is dysregulated and disconnected and there's conflict, what occurs when they move from that place to a place of deep, grounded, open connection. There are phases and stages of how the human system moves from that place of dysregulation to connected regulation. And I built the model around that, not some nice idea. It's like, this is how the human body and the human psyche functions in relationship. And, if we have time at some point in the future, I'd love to kind of get into and share a bit more about how that works. But essentially, what the work I do is about recognizing that in us, there are saved, embodied, incomplete pieces from our history, from our past. This is the brilliance of the human system. We get wounded, we get hurt. Anything that can't get healed or integrated in real time gets saved in the body, and the mind. I also like the concept of body mind. Like, it's not separate things. It's like there's a whole piece there. And our job, and what our unconscious mind is naturally doing, is recreating the exact circumstances and inner states that reflect that initial wound, so that we can show up differently, so we can be present to and show up as the loving, caring parent that we wanted or needed when we were little. And so in a real way, what life is up to is completing itself in an evolutionary way. As life completes what's incomplete, it becomes something it wasn't before. Mm-hmm. And my work is all about helping people do that, and then helping teach people how to do that for those that want to be able to do it more with themselves and others, or for coaches or therapists that want to be able to bring more of that wholeness and completeness to the people they work with.
Are you calling that transformative communication, or it's also a form of parts work?
Yeah, well, it includes, again, when you look at models that are reflecting what's really going on, then there's going to be all this kind of overlap and similarity. But it's that there's a dissociative process when something gets wounded, and we shut off or close off to life. we create a polarization, a non-collaborative polarization. That's the fracturing of the human psyche, the human mind. And any integrative work, any healing work is about bringing those pieces and parts back into kind of integrated and collaborative relationship.
I better close out now because more questions are running through me that I could open up a whole new can of worms and continue to go there. I do foresee another future podcast and more collaborations. Thank you so much, Dolphin, for all the work that you're doing in the world. I'm so grateful to know you and to share you with whoever is listening to this episode. Thank you.
Yeah, total pleasure to be here, Christina. Always enjoyable, and I appreciate you and what you're up to. I look forward to our next opportunity.
Ditto. Thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of Deepen with Christina. If you do enjoy this podcast, please do like, subscribe, rate, give it 5 stars. It helps more people find it, helps me continue to host it. Until next time, bye for now.